And welcome to the Crash Chords podcast. In space! We're not actually in space.
Actually, we are in space. We're on the Earth, which is traveling at a velocity in space.
I'm sorry. I missed that number.
It was a really big number. Your uneducated mind could not comprehend it.
That made it. I had comments and they all went away.
Well,
We are traveling at a velocity.
we are. A particular velocity in space.
A very important velocity. Many people have to remember that number. Apparently John
Ma-
doesn't.
John's not one of
I'm
them.
not an astrophysicist, so it's not like an important
Thank-
number to me.
It's true.
Thank goodness.
We are spinning at about 900 miles an hour.
That's really fast.
Yeah, it's a spin, but that's not even counting around the sun, so that's just a velocity. We'll leave it at that.
But then again, from my point of view, staying right here, everything else is moving. It's all relative. Thanks, Einstein.
Oh, boy. Anyway, big news.
My relatives are relative.
I have relatives.
Anyway, big news, everybody!
You might as well continue with that big news.
Big news. After months and months of deliberation and strife, we're finally going to be back on iTunes. We were able to fix the RSS feed. I resubmitted it to iTunes today as we are recording. They said within 24 hours it should be up online and searchable. So,
Which means there could still be a problem in these 24 hours. So by the time this podcast is up, you could be wrong.
But we should be on.
Please check and let us know. Oh, God.
Anyway, please go ahead and check us out on iTunes. Subscribe.
Hopefully.
Leave a review. That would be fantabulous.
Fantabulous isn't a word.
Sure it is.
No, I make up words. That's not a word.
I went on Urban Dictionary this morning, and that is a word.
See. Wow, Steve's on my side for a change. Also, this Thursday at the Way Station, the Wasties are playing, 9 o'clock. So come check that out. If you haven't seen them, they are a ton of fun to go see. And that's really it on the pre-album news and announcements.
You used to be a lot better at news, like in episode
Terrible.
1.
I kind of want you to put in the dun 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 news bulletin thing.
Oh, yeah. I'll
That's probably
write it.
copyrighted.
You should.
I'll write one.
Yeah, write one.
I was going to say, you have to write one because that
Did you know?
one
Yeah,
is
that's an
copyrighted.
interesting piece of music facts, because that's what we do. John Williams wrote the NBC theme.
I knew that, actually. I don't know why, but I knew that. I remember hearing that before.
Then John Williams wrote the NBC theme.
That is an amazing factoid, and I'm so happy for you to share that with me.
I'm so glad to have shared it with you and enriched your life with it.
I also found out today from you that he wrote Pee Wee Herman's.
That
No.
was not him.
That was Danny Elfman.
Oh, that was Elfman. Oh yeah, strike that, reverse it.
Danny Elfman's first soundtrack composition was for Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
There we are.
Anyway,
And there we are.
Let's jump into our album this week, which is John's pick.
This week we delved into math rock. Math rock was created.
Usually one starts with the name of the album that we're reviewing.
I'm leading up to that.
Oh, okay.
Let him do it his way. Oh, God.
Dead air. Math rock was a mid to late 80s mid to late 90s creation of rock and roll that came from experimental indie. Its themes are atypical rhythm structure, angular melodies, dissonant chords, odd time signatures. These are the big things that make it separate from other styles of rock because it's the core foundation.
It's kind of the principle of prog rock, but at the same time, it's using different styles. Prog was born out of 70s, so you had 70s rock themes to work with, major 70s bands. And today, we have indie seems to be the most prevalent rock genre. If you're going to go straight to the core of what rock is, that's kind of the most prevalent rock genre throughout the 2000s. So math rock kind of furthered that and said, let's take that to the next logical insane level.
Now, math rock's also very big on drums. Drums tend to take a forefront role in a lot of the music that's created. They're very unusual, experimental, and fast-paced in a lot of cases. It also tends to use tapping guitars, which is just tapping the strings instead of fully strumming or plucking them.
Now, are you sure that's math rock throughout, or is that our specific artist today?
No, it's
We
math
haven't
rock
said the
throughout.
name yet.
It's not ubiquitous, but it's very prevalent in the genre.
Gotcha.
And speaking of the person we're doing today, Marnie Stern. Marnie Stern has been around since about 2007. She actually came into math rock after its death. It only lasted about 10 years. This is her 4th album, Chronicles of Marnia.
Clever.
I like it.
I think so.
That's part of the reason it caught my eye. Or
no,
ear.
no other reason.
Or ear.
Ear. Yeah, I guess ear. We technically don't have visual senses. This is a podcast, as it were.
Well,
Yes.
we have them, but they can't.
It's irrelevant, though. It's absolutely irrelevant.
Okay, next podcast I'm doing blindfolded. Just
like
to
it.
make a point.
I like it.
Yes.
I like it. And
That's-
they won't know you're making that point, but it's important that we make it.
Well, we'll probably point it out because we always point out the physical on a audio podcast
Yes.
anyway.
Mr.
Plus,
Break
I
the
won't be
fourth
able to
wall.
read my notes.
You have kinks to work out.
Yes.
In other words.
Well, you'll just cut eye holes in the blindfold, and then it'll be a mask.
Anyway.
No, it'll be a Jewish cheat, a Jewish eye fold. Is that a thing?
No,
Anyway,
no such thing.
The Orthodoxes will get that.
Marnie Stern. First track is Year of the Glad.
So this album starts off very interestingly.
He pulls right back. He can't even dive in.
I can't. So, like, we
glad
pretty much
you did-
all
I'm
had
glad
this.
you did that, though.
We all had the same reaction, pretty much. The first track, it's one of those you turn on the album and just kind of go, "Wait, what?"
It has a very unusual vocal progression.
I really thought the first time I heard the first track that it was in another language, that it wasn't English.
It's
I
reminiscent.
was close to thinking that it was at least an accent. I thought it was Australian or something at first.
J-pop comes to mind.
We're
and
American, could you tell?
J-pop comes to mind almost immediately, which is one of the things Japanese rock, noise rock, and Japanese pop borrows heavily from math rock. So this is not an unusual piece,
And
but it's really
when it comes
interesting.
right down to it, I think it's also just her natural vocals. I mean, she's got this very light and airy voice with kind of a punch to it. And the band is from the artist and the band, they're all from the Midwest, I believe. I'm
Yes.
not positive about that, and in fact, a lot of math rock bands are from the Midwest.
The
That's just a
breadbasket
little
of the U.S. spawned it.
thing. There you are.
Well, I guess there's not much else to do around there.
Well,
Does that make music?
it's because the
math
Midwest...
rock bands unite against Matt.
All 5 of them. No, strike that. No, it's because indie rock itself was very prevalent in the Midwest. And being a part of it, it just spawned. But back to Year of the Glad. Okay, there was a lot of going on. That was the weird part of the song.
And it's not. It's almost like birds chirping, kind of.
Yes.
It's a little bit.
Deranged mutant birds.
See, I would take a different approach. I would call it kind of cute in its way.
Oh, no, yeah.
This is why, like, not just birds, but birdies. They're chirping.
Well, it sounded like that's why.
This is why I liken it to J-pop.
Yeah,
J-pop,
that's
because
exactly
J-pop
the connection I made.
Is very much, it's
Very cutesy.
It's teeny bopper stuff and whatnot. Which, not to say that this song, or especially not this album, is anything close to teeny bopper stuff, but it's that style of singing that is just so playful. I mean,
Yeah.
there's very little else you can think about it. When she chose it as the first track, so I imagine it was a little bit, shock and awe is what
Well,
she's
yeah,
going
and
for.
also, I mean, the arrangement is so unique. Even within the very first moments of the song, you already know you're getting something unlike anything you've heard anytime soon, unless you're an active math rock fan, I
And
guess.
that the big component was the speed of the drums.
This is
that was
like
a major part of
this
this
is
song.
like indie rock heaven. I mean, for all the indie kids, here's something to really make your neck hairs stand up.
It was just-
And something you probably won't understand as a basic indie kid. This is a little bit out of the average person's grasp, perhaps. Well, I don't say average person, but the very casual music listener. This is for people that enjoy intensity, enjoy complexity, all the crazy time signatures, all that stuff going on. It's up there.
At first, when we heard this track, I couldn't even decide at that moment whether it was a good or a bad intro. I only wrote that it was a strange intro track.
Yeah.
But upon examination afterwards and having listened to the whole album, I think the shock and awe kind of impact of this song works as a very good intro track because it pulls you in.
It pulls
gets
you
your
in.
attention.
It's memorable.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
It gets stuck in your head whether you like it or not. Because I could easily see with the wrong audience, I could see this grating a few people. I mean, it's possible.
This song rides the edge between annoying and inspired. It can very easily go one way or the other during the same listen.
And I'll go with what you said earlier, a touch of avant. A little bit of avant nature to at least her manner of singing. And
also, quality has little to do with a song being catchy. Because we all know songs can get stuck in your head that are terrible. It's just, it's got to have that it factor that gets stuck in your head, that hook. And this had it.
The considering was right in the line, I do say this had it.
Yeah.
It had it. The
it. Whatever it was, it had it.
It had it. But and also I should pull back a little bit. The crazy time signatures, I mean, they do kind of. At first I was, it seems like a straightforward song in terms of form at first. But there's some funny things that they do. Like later on, it starts out with a very basic 4/4 verse chorus, and then it moves into this like 6/4 interlude. And the real interesting part of this song, which I think is a credit to the type of stuff that the artist comes up with, is when all the instruments pull away, and it's just her chorusing over herself with just the two voices. Actually, the instruments didn't pull away. I'm sorry, that's the next track. But the two voices, she kind of overlays herself, and she does that considerably throughout this album.
Mm-hmm.
And she creates this dissonance, like right, because most of this is in F major, and she creates this dissonance right on the fifth at C, and she goes back and forth between C, D, B. It's like right in there, and as the other voice comes over to layer that, it sort of does the opposite thing. So you're stuck in these really, really tight intervals, and you get this really compact dissonance. It's even more grating, perhaps, for the wrong audience, but really, really interesting to the person who's interested in indie rock pushing the boundaries, and this pushes more than the boundaries.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting way to do it, and probably this album, the first time since Steam Powered Draft that we have very interesting harmonies, except these harmonies are all by the same person harmonizing with herself, which makes it even more interesting, I think.
Yeah.
She does a great job. She's got a very... she has a beautiful voice. She really does. Lyrics take a backseat in this album, and
that's only because the music, this is almost like the God Sticks argument that you made. It's like, when the music is so almost overbearing, you can't avoid it. You're not really going to be sitting there listening to, oh yeah, I really feel what she's saying.
Yeah.
Which is not a discredit to the time that she took to write those lyrics. It's just that I treat her voice as an instrument, a beautiful instrument.
Yeah, but there are moments on this record where her lyrics shine through, and they're very good, too.
They are. But in this particular case, especially when you're talking about e's and oohs and that's a soundbite right there.
No, of course, yeah.
It's used that way.
All right, let's move on to the second track, You Don't Turn Down. After being thrown off by the first track, this is where I got really hooked. The intro. Solid intro. It's this
very
great
ethereal guitar riff.
Ethereal guitar riff. This song has, on the whole, this song has a very in-your-face attitude about itself, but unlike one of the I can't remember which song it was last week by Nine Inch Nails, this isn't a false bravado. This is very in-your-face, and it's got an attitude to back it up. It really, especially in the chorus, I love the lyrics in the chorus.
This song also had, I'll get back to the lyrics in a minute, but three really distinct aspects, distinct melodies in the song. It was a three-parted song.
This is not even so much three-part. I would actually call it a ternary form with an intro and an outro.
A what-ed form?
Ternary form, ABA. Where you're in... I mean, first of all, you have the riff, the intro, and then it kind of dives into this E power chord, right? It's a very strong power chord. That's in 4. And then we move through these little gritty E minor rock feel. You're getting a little bit more serious. And then she dives into this very thin A, E minor. It's more like a it's almost like a southern rock feel, I want to say. Did anybody get that vibe for that verse section?
Yeah.
Because it could be called the verse, very simply.
Although, we already had a long conversation about how the first chorus in this album is not quite as defined as other albums.
Yeah. But this is the A section.
Yeah.
And the reason I call it ternary form is because this returns once more at the end of the album. As, the verse would do. So, you could call this verse, chorus, verse, but it's tough for me to really call the B section the chorus. Because it's so... That heavy section, that really, upbeat, dancey section, that's almost like has a life out into itself. Not in the same way that a chorus does, which is supposed to, kind of gather everybody together. It's an independent thing. Yeah, it almost feels like it could have come back again, but I mean, shouldn't have. I'm not sure.
But the lines that are repeated, that especially where the attitude I'm talking about come from, that feels very chorusy. It feels very much
then it was actually a chorus verse chorus.
Yeah.
In some ways. The lines...
I don't know if I could go that far, because I feel... It doesn't feel as intense.
Lyrically.
It feels very... Okay, lyrically.
Maybe
I'm
lyrically. Talking lyrically.
Alright, well, let's talk about this section by section, then. That A section, first of all, it's very thin. As I said, it just goes between two chords. It goes between E minor and A major. And it just goes back and forth, or it could even just be a thinner power chord. And to go along with that southern rock feel, I would almost bump that up a notch toward the punk era as well.
Okay,
kind of had that vibe going for me as well.
In the guitars, I can see it a bit.
Grunge, kind of, But it is thin. It's thin for this album. It really just those two chords, and the focus is on her voice. And then it just gives way to that B section, which it's it's night and day.
Yeah.
When you really think about it.
But it's one of those things...
One is so thin and one is so busy.
But it's not night and day in its fact that they feel unrelated. They yet still feel connected. They do feel connected somehow.
It doesn't have the same connection.
It was a clever transition.
Yeah.
Later on the album, the transitions are extremely fluid and extremely living, if anything. These were a little more separate. The pieces, the sections themselves are a little more separate and distinct. They don't quite mesh the same way, and it is a little bit jarring.
I think it's because of the transition, to be honest. The transition is the reason, you know what, I don't even know if I could say that. This was an island in the early half of this album, because I think that's something we should have really said up front, is that there's an arc to this album that the songs do appear to gain more soul as they go on toward the end.
The whole second
and
half.
More cohesion, more tightness in those transitions. But I'm going to defend track 2 as an island in this early...
The album is a solid 10 track, and track 6, the title track, on is where it starts to really gain that soul. But I will agree that 2 would have fit. It is an island.
2 would have fit better at the end. Well, I don't want to say that because actually 2 enhances the overall feel of this. So if perhaps the choice was to place track 2 early on because it felt a little bit sporadic, then I think it was a very well timed choice. But
I agree.
Back to those transitions. What really makes this a stunning transition to me, I think, is because of the chorusing that she does with her voice again. It's very similar to what she did in track 1, which shows that that's going to be a recurring feature, where she takes her own voice and then she layers herself against it, and it alternates back and forth with this weird phasing effect, which is just brilliant. And then she dives into that really heavy rock bit. It was really gripping for me. First time I heard it.
It was also gripping in the words themselves. This was some of the better lyrical work on the album, especially for the first half. Echoes coming down the hallway, time is up, I heard them say. Old ideas glowing through the doorway, with the fear creeping in. And I'm losing hope in my body, losing hope in my body.
There you are.
And that's the losing hope in my body bit is the part that really conveyed that attitude that was building in the song.
She really had a soulful nature in those words that caught you. That really.
This is the first time you get a sense of emotion in this song, in this album. With this song, it's not even a clear-cut emotion. It's just you kind of feel some semblance of passion and intensity, but it's not clear.
You can't tell if it's positive emotion or negative emotion.
Yeah, it's just
track 1 was
intense.
Glee.
That's really what
this has a lot more depth to it.
Yeah. There's more layers.
That specific lyric that you mentioned, I think, is the reason why that B section holds such an independent feel to me, and why I can't quite call it a chorus, because there's such a personal element there that it feels independent of the rest.
I guess. I meant it was a chorus lyrically, but I can understand what you mean. I don't know. I just feel like the way the line's repeated, and it's repeated again later.
Think about the way certain songs flow. There's always that moment which seems like it's reaching out to the rest of humanity almost. That's typically what we call the chorus. And then there's that moment where the song seems to almost get introverted. Like it's in its own thing. You don't want to bother it. Just let it go through the motions. And sometimes that's when it's really at its best. And that's really why I got to call this a B section, as opposed to just this worldly, I
understand.
So
grab hands, join Kumbaya chorus.
In other words, this song is an intro, verse, 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 outro. To some,
I don't know. You got the extra verse in there.
Because there's no chorus.
2 verses. Oh, you mean a whole separate verse?
Verse A, verse B. It really...
This is why in classical terminology we call it ternary form. It's ABA. It's very simple. It doesn't have to... That's a broad term right there. Ternary.
This song doesn't need to conform to your stereotypes, man.
I guess not. Because actually ternary probably wouldn't have an intro or outro, so I am letting it breathe, Matt. Thank you.
Anyway, moving on to the next track. Track 3 is Noonan. So, this track... trying to describe it...
Wait a second. You didn't mention the outro on the previous track.
I was less impressed with the outro than the intro.
I was much more impressed with the outro.
Really? I liked the intro more on the last track.
Bull.
What do you mean,
I'm
bull?
arguing that straight up.
No, I like the simplicity of the intro more than the outro.
The fact that you're rushing this is so shocking to me. The outro is so gentle. It almost like the song flipped on itself.
No,
it
I'm
occurs...
not feeling it at the same... I did not feel it to the same extent.
Yeah, I thought it was absolutely gorgeous. I mean, if this is a point of contention, I'll just put it out there and say that it's right at that outro. As soon as she finishes the last A section, she goes into this D major 7 chord where the guitar is slowly cycling through itself, just cycling through all the different components of that chord, note by note, and putting it all over a pedal of A. And it's just gorgeous. Meanwhile, she keeps doing her chorusing effect, where she goes up and down. And that, too, balances over itself. I think that was absolutely beautiful, and it had almost a post-rock feel that I didn't see anywhere else in this album. I was almost a bit disappointed that I didn't see it anywhere else in this album, but still, it was the alluring moment. At the end of track 2, this is what told me I was going to be really interested in everything else she was going to say. Putting it out there.
I mean, I'm not saying you're wrong. I don't know. It didn't affect me.
If it didn't affect you,
I don't think it affected me as much as it did you. I liked it. I thought it was pretty, but I was more drawn in by the intro than I was affected by the outro.
I'll play it for you later. You'll agree. Track 3.
Wow.
Noonan
was a cohesive combination of contained clusters.
That didn't sound
And
at all scripted.
No.
Not at all.
No, but that one had to be written
I don't know.
down.
Me and Steve were riffing back and forth, and we came up with a alliteration of ridiculousness.
But by sections, it had some of my favorite tapping drum combinations, but there was no glue.
The problem with this is
It was a cluster.
This was the kind of a continuous dance. It was just. It's hard to describe. Like, there was only a couple moments in this track which I felt were really like reaching out to me, and those may have been like the guitar that holds this high note every once in a while. It's like this 7th scale degree, and it just hangs over the rest. Like, that's an intriguing moment. But when you consider the rest of the track, it's all just a lot of, just a dance. The guitars are used almost as backdrop. It
almost becomes too cluttered.
Well, that's why it's funny that you were using the cluttered terminology, because clutter almost implies that it's going through so many sections that you can't keep a track of. And there's other songs
that are more cluttered than that.
Do that more so, exactly. Yeah. This is almost cluttered for the opposite reason. It's one section that is kind of just loud front to back.
Yeah.
It's not that I didn't like this track, it's just that because it's so consistent in that regard, it doesn't have the hook.
Yeah, it
doesn't breathe in order to have the hook.
Yeah.
But there is still a nice melody there.
And there are moments in the
this
song
entire album has awesome melodies.
Yeah. Man, I don't know there's much else to say about this track. It was just, the lyrics were okay. Nothing really stood out.
Nothing gripping. It was getting... you weren't focusing on the lyrics. You were focusing on her vocal
No, I'm
work.
okay. You tried to rush through the last track and rush through that outro. Well, guess what? I'm going to rush through this one.
I'm okay with that.
There's really not much to say.
This one...
Damn it, no argument.
This one kind of fell flat.
Yeah. It wasn't bad by any means, but it just didn't really grip us. The next track, track 4, Nothing Is Easy. So this one had, the first time we heard this really heard this tapping guitar intro that was almost Who or U2-esque.
It was
larger than life.
Yeah, it was really... It was almost arena rock.
Almost, yeah.
I likened it to something else, and that was, at least in terms of the verse structure, if you can call it a verse, again, we're going to have that discrepancy. I got almost a gospel feel out of the chord structures early on in this track. Not gospel in the overt, you're sitting in church kind of sense, but certain chords here did ring of almost an old-fashioned design, and yet here's her avant nature playing, is that she would keep those chords going. It's like an insane string of chords here. It's starts out with the 4, down to the 1, then the 5, then the 1, then the 5, then the 6, minor 6, ooh. And then she moves on to another section, which is more of a pre-chorus. But it's so tightly knit, almost at the point, and this is where I think I'm going to have my issue with this track, because this pre-chorus gives way to the chorus so quickly that it made me almost feel like that was the goal of this particular... But yet the opening verse sounded just as important. And it felt like all this happened within the span of, under 30 seconds to 45 seconds. I mean, it's a little quick for it to move through so many sections so fast. I almost feel like the ideas should have been, elaborated.
Especially since later on, in a track that was probably shorter, elaborates in a short period of time way better. But that's something also that we haven't said about this album yet that we should bring up now that we're already on track 4. The longest track on this record was 3.5 minutes.
Oh yeah, every single... I almost feel like that's the whole math rock goal, is to sort of just bring up so many... Get to the... Well... Yeah, no, alright, I'll go with that. Get to the point. It's like it wants to take prog and compress it.
Yeah.
But
not rush it. It's not rushed, except in a few moments... But especially the whole second half of the album...
I would almost say that this one particular section here was rushed.
Yeah,
not that I didn't enjoy it.
Right.
It's just I want more. I want more of each individual section.
But it didn't feel as a complete piece, because the moments were great. But with the huge tempo changing, the huge time signature changing that they were doing in here, it lost its connection. It became a little bit hard to follow the flow of the song.
Well, it's like I said, this transition from the verse, or if you want to call it an A section, into this pre-chorus and into the B. The pre-chorus sounds like it has a lot of emphasis placed on it. It's sort of this one chord to a... Actually, no, more of a 4 to a... It's really hard to say, because there are times where I can't even grapple with which key this was in. At the I actually ran under the presumption that this was in E until I realized it was in B, and I went back and redid all of my chords when I was looking through this. It's a weird little thing that she plays. So then finally when she settles in with the real chorus, which is what I call the B section, that is undeniably B major.
Yeah.
But it makes you rethink the first section, which you had previously thought was going to be the focus of the track, was going to be the home, the placement, and it cycles back and forth so easily that it's almost like there's two homes at once, which could be an artistic idea right there.
It could be intentional. I mean, it could very easily be intentional.
I mean, listening to this several times, you can't not like it.
Yeah.
It's just, I definitely have little questions as to the overall art of it, the overall experience. I find myself replaying certain sections, as opposed to just listening to the whole track over and over. I want to get the most out of that part that I like.
But the funny thing about that is that a lot of it, because it's based on perception and interpretation, when she wrote it, she could have been going for something else completely. And we're just interpreting it our own way. And that's kind of one of the beautiful things about it.
That's a disclaimer here. I mean, this podcast is all interpretation. And
right.
We're just putting ideas out there.
From my point of view, I also got to question some of the other aspects of it, and that's the lyrics. not to be a hater, but to be a little bit of a hater, indie rock is not well known for its quality lyrics. That's just... They tend to be very interpretive, and if you don't get it, you're never going to get it. And for indie rock, not a lot of people get it. The line, "You don't need a sledgehammer to walk in my shoes," I don't get. And I cannot see how to understand that poetically.
Here's the rub. I found that to be one of the most pointed moments on this album, despite the fact that I may not get it. Because, we spent a lot of other cases where we're analyzing lyrics to death. This one, I almost don't think it's worth it. It's because of its statement. Remember I was reading through the chords right there? This falls right on the minor 6, and it's almost the most gripping musical moment before we exit, or very subtly exit, the verse into the pre-chorus. And that moment was beautiful. It's from a musical standpoint. Lyric-wise, I don't care at that moment. It's not enough. It's not enough to drag it down.
I do have to care in this case. Because it's so clear-cut and so in your face, I just got a question, what's going on here? And
I'm all about context, and contextually speaking, I think that her voice, her melody was the emphasis at that particular moment.
And I've always said that.
And it is personal. I mean, you could.
It's just a little hang-up I got on this one.
Stray ideas for meaning can come to mind. Little wisps of meaning. For instance, you don't need to walk in my shoes. That's always... That comes up in a lot of music, and it comes up in everyday conversation in general. That phrase. It's always a very personal thing, and I feel that the way she phrased it was personal.
That's where I disagree. I don't feel that personal nature in what she's saying.
See, I'm with Steve on this, because also it's just the structure of the song in that moment. It's not. You don't need to understand something to enjoy it. In any case.
Oh no, I wholeheartedly agree.
And this is one of those moments for me where the way she sang it was so personal. It was how she sang it, not what she said.
But I just got to point that out. I didn't feel that I didn't feel it.
So I didn't feel that. I think at that point it's personal taste.
I felt it when I thought it was in E, and then when I thought it was in B, I still felt it.
I don't know. It's just something. I mean, you gotta look at it this way. You're not coming to this album for lyrics.
No, definitely not.
Well, there's other things to mention here, and I think this is really the more of the sore spot for me. It's definitely more of the avant choices, and that's what she decides to do down here in the chorus, or B section, what have you. And that's this grating dissonance that's thrown in there. It seems like a G in the middle of nowhere, just thrown in there. It might have been another note too. I'm not entirely positive, but it comes off as this non-chord tone that's clearly not in the key. And the way she sings it, it's either the way she sings or the way the guitar hits it. It almost sounds, the way both of them combined, it almost sounds like a kazoo. And the kazoo hits in that one moment in the middle of this.
For all
this
you know,
statement.
It was a kazoo.
Maybe it was, but either way, it was out of tune. And far be it from me to criticize it, because normally I like pushing harmonies, and I enjoy many of her harmonic choices throughout this album. It's just this one in particular felt a little bit. It didn't achieve anything at that moment to me.
Can you tune a kazoo?
You can have different kazoos.
This brings me back to that jazz professor of mine who was like, you know what? If you want to compose all symphony in a kazoo, go for it. Just go for it. In fact, I'd like to see it in my desk next week.
Wow. Okay.
Yes.
Well, I think that's a great way to close talking about Nothing Is Easy. So moving on to Immortals. So my initial problem with Immortals is...
I'm not done yet. Oh my god.
Oh gosh.
What else?
There's a lot to talk about here. You didn't even mention the melody itself throughout all of this. The melody, that jerky manner of her speaking, I thought that was something to note also. How every single phrase felt like it was a couplet and that it was kind of against everything else. Nobody... That didn't... God damn it.
Register with me.
It felt like she was anticipating the beat before it happened. And I felt like that in itself kind of promotes this for me.
Okay.
So, you're talking about, pluses and minuses here. This was something unique. She didn't do this on any other track on the album, but she did it here.
Clearly I need to listen to it again, because I didn't notice that. But I'll sure.
This is what you get. This is what you get when you're talking to other hosts.
This is what you get when you mix your science in my music.
Oh, I'll mix.
Anyway, can we go to Immortals now?
Yeah, why the
Track
hell not?
5,
Why the hell
Immortals.
not?
So my big problem with Immortals was something that Steve pointed out on a third listen of the track itself. That first, the initial thing I didn't like on my first listen was that the tapping guitar that was in the previous track was exactly the same in this track. What I didn't notice is that guitar doesn't actually start initially with the track. There's a good 2 or 3 second delay where it's a different guitar, and then this tapping guitar, almost as if two different tracks are playing at the same time.
Much like my little kazoo moment here.
Yeah.
This is one of those weird artistic choices that I just don't understand.
I didn't like it
For
either.
avant purposes, I'm always intrigued by new ideas. I just didn't get this one. This one was strange.
No, this idea was to turn the drums into a lead guitar and the tapping guitar work into a drum beat. That's how I felt the instruments were being treated in this one. They got the guitar and drums were completely flipped on each other. I don't think it wasn't 100%.
I mean, for all intents and purposes, I do believe you're correct.
Yeah.
But
it's,
that didn't help the song as a whole for me.
No,
Because if anything, what happens as a result of that is you diminish the drum in the grand scheme of things. And we should say, because I don't think we've said it enough, that the drum work in this album is phenomenal. It's phenomenal throughout, like every single song. So what happens, because let's face it, the drums, they're there. They're there to keep rhythm and all the careful rhythms that they're building as a band. And yet, you only will really hear the drum, and it'll reach out to you in moments where it's stated in such a way that separates it from the group. You know, it's all about context. And in this particular case, the drum is doing this amazing thing throughout the track in his own little world. Meanwhile, the guitars are just kind of creating a very standard riff. Just it's kind of spastic a little bit, but it is a little bit it's a little bit static, and
it feels more static because you're hearing a sound you heard
static spasticity. It's weird,
but it also feels more static because again you heard one of these guitar sounds through an entire previous track, and now it's not through the entire track on this. But it keeps coming back, and
that little U2 / Who, whatever that high guitar that we're talking about it. That honestly starts to wear off of me, wear on me in the latter half of this track.
Yeah.
So
that's not saying it's not. That's not saying it's not impressive.
Of course, it's
no. It was, but if it was impressive the first time I heard it in the previous track, it's like
why did it need to be propagated so close? Why did it have to?
Like
be
if
the
you were
going to
do the tapping again, do different notes or do different
It just
key.
makes me wonder.
It was exactly the same as the previous track.
Or use it
it's
more
as
texturally.
It's as if she sampled it again, the same exact specific track of that tapping.
That's what you said. We both had the same experience. You put it on and you think that almost there's another browser or another music player
window
on your computer playing the previous track. Oh, wait, was I playing that in another window and I forgot to stop it?
It's weird. It just kind of blanketed this track.
Yeah, it kind of throws
it
smothered the drum work.
It smothered it, and the drum work is there. It's just without
smothered it, and murdered it, and buried it.
Did not murder. Did not bury.
Did not murder. These are two harsh terms.
Yes. I'm exaggerating.
It did smother it. It was overbearing. I guess might be more appropriate, but it wasn't like...
Had there been more playful rhythmic nature throughout this track, joining in with the guitars and the other instruments, then that same drum work would have been phenomenal, and it would have jumped out in places.
You had the right word right there. Playful. There was that playful nature. This seemed a little more rigid, maybe?
Yes.
You were losing the fun of the previous tracks.
This might have been one of my least favorite tracks.
It is an uplifting track, but it loses the fun touch because there's not, this has been a very hypertensive album.
Yeah.
And I mean that to...
Very intense record as well. And this track just kind of fell short. And again, it wasn't bad by any means. Just, to me, it was a little jarring because it felt repetitive.
Yeah, it was technically...
And for this album to feel repetitive is not easy.
Well, from here, our discussion's going to take kind of a swing because... from the next track on, it kind of fixes a lot of the little issues that we had one by one, and that starts immediately with that playful nature.
Yeah,
the next track, Chronicles of Marnia, track 6, we get a straight up jig.
Irish all the way.
It was.
Oh,
it wasn't
awesome.
exactly. It sounded to me in composition similar to later Flogging Molly. That the way the jig sounded, even though obviously the singing-
without the overbearing Irish
Right.
instrumentation.
but
perhaps.
the composition of
Yeah.
the basic build felt very similar to that.
And it was immediately uplifting.
Indigo's
Immediately-
Irish.
It was immediately
Essentially.
energizing.
Oh, so energizing. This
Yeah.
is like
It was a shot in the arm.
this is like down the B scale, down the B scale. It's just like so.
Her ability to really set speed and tone and to really punctuate her instruments is just showcased so beautifully in this song. It's got incredible speed changes. That's one thing I got to point out. It changes on a dime, but in such a way that you just love it.
And yet the jig part is, standard 4/4, because after all, a jig has to be kind of straightforward. And that's, I think, what was really impressive here, is that she was able to, because towards the end of those phrases, when she's done with the jig section, then she does proceed to go through these really quickly changing rhythmic touches. And it's impressive that it's able to still remain relatable and accessible, I think, to anybody who's looking to have fun, while still having those, her own creative touch. Like, it's a jig first and foremost, but it's such a complex one. And I don't say that often for jigs.
This track definitely felt very accessible, but yeah, it wasn't overly simplified, it wasn't boring. It was this kind of perfect blend of something that could start simple, but then was perfectly built upon.
And the second thing I want to talk about is her vocals. I mean, they take off in this album in this track so much.
Yeah.
It's
Her emotions and her vocals, the energy in her vocals is perfectly mirrored with the jig nature, and is perfectly. That's what helps bleed everything through.
and to go with that range as well.
Yeah.
She
she
hit those
really
high
shows her
notes.
range. Yeah.
Goes to a high F sharp, and it's like. First of all, it's enhanced by the fact that I think she's layering over herself for a good portion of this album.
Yeah.
And that makes it even jump out anymore. But still, great artistic choice. I mean, when that note hits, it's throat grabbing.
Well, yeah, it immediately grabs your attention. You
Yeah.
can't help but focus on it.
And there's one line that actually rings out in this song that really, it's sort of a meta line. I would think they'd follow you through the bravest metaphor. There's something about that just adds some flavor, and
She metaphored the hell out of that metaphor.
No, it's first of all, you're working on a pun, the Chronicles of Marnia. You're working Irish jig blended with, I don't even know how to describe the rest of it. I would think they'd follow you through the bravest metaphor. She's talking about her music, speaking of something else. It's an incredible idea.
Right, and then the second thing I want to talk about, it's probably more than second by now.
Third.
Probably up to like third.
This is
maybe
like
fourth.
fifth or sixth.
Well, that's my last point for this particular track, and this is just a little aside based on a point that I probably made in a previous podcast, because it comes up a lot when I see the phrasing of certain ideas. And considering we're talking about this track, where I think a lot of the little issues that I have with some of the earlier tracks have been fixed, and how, I want to talk about the composition of a certain idea. For instance, take that idea with the really high F sharp, where she's belting it out, and there's even a little bit of a bend down there, and she just holds it. And then that exact same phrase is repeated perfectly. Now, I was told by an old professor way back when that when you come up with an idea as a young composer, say you were a young composer, and you come up with a really, really great idea, and then you quickly rush it out and then move to the next idea. It's a sign that you are a young composer, because the fear for young composers is always that this is going to get stale. This is going to get stale. I want to move on. I want to stay fresh. If I stay fresh, if I engage the audience in a constant, overbearing way, that's how I will be revered or acknowledged. And that's always a mistake, because the sign of a great song, the sign of a great idea, is when you take that one idea and you reinvent it, or you repeat it, because it is, after all, a great idea. I mean, you want to make the best out of that idea, and you want to make it the best you could possibly make it, so why not persist it? in some of the previous tracks, I noticed, for instance, the Nothing Is Easy. That's when you were cycling through so many ideas so fast, I almost feel like it was making that error. And that is completely healed in Chronicles of Marnia. I mean, why not? Don't let a good thing go to waste.
No, there's excellent breathing in this song, that everything gets expanded and showcased in such a way that nothing feels disjointed, even though they're very distinct. There's very distinct ABCs, but they all feel like the same alphabet, which Nothing Is Easy felt like different languages to some extent.
Right, and because I think that issue was remedied, we start to move on here into more cohesive pieces, more somewhat slower paced, but I mean that in terms of breathing, as John said.
Yeah.
It's almost as if from here on in, this is where the album really starts to gain its soul.
And it's really obvious in the next track, Still Moving. First of all, from the beginning, you're breached with this strong rock-out bass line that ends up running the course of most of the track. It's the most prevalent a bass line had been.
This is also another
in the whole
thing.
Track.
This song, I mean, a good portion of this is in 6/4, and it's made me realize this is one of my favorite time signatures, just because of the heart-beating nature to this like two-step waltz. It's dun 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 dun. Well, of course, slower than that.
Yeah.
But it's really, it comes through in certain the melodies that she comes up with, and that's one of the reasons why I made a point to go back and state the tuplet melody that was appearing back in Nothing Is Easy, because it was very important there, and it's even more important here. But it comes with the specific ideas, like I said, those great one-shots. For instance, the and no one came. Like, just when she says that line itself, within that 6/4 structure, that you can really play around with melodies, because it's a longer stretch. You're not as rigid. Like four beats goes by quickly. Six is you can fulfill yourself.
Well, this was the song where I said, even though it was short, it took those ideas and expressed them fully and completely without rushing, even though it was still a short song.
Yeah, and it was the combination of that bass line dueling with the drums to some extent. They were at times in unison, but mostly competing with one another, and they actually used her vocals and the tapping guitar to really to set up a unity, and the tapping guitar was a lot more playful.
It wasn't the same key like in the previous tracks.
And instead, it did stay very stable. But it would allow the bass to touch upon it. It would allow the drums to touch upon it at different parts, and then pull back. And then it was that competing nature that was just very, very unique and very distinct in this track.
And I'm gonna point out another moment here, because to follow that moment I mentioned earlier, there's this. It's another usage of that 6/4, like to a really, really creative touch, and that's that. Nobody knows when it's gonna be. Do anybody recall that particular line where she goes she crescendos and then decrescendos, and yet it almost feels like it's against the rhythm, but it's because of how it's like she splits that in terms of like a parabolic arch, when really it's just two beats two notes, 2 syllables for each and every beat within the 6/4 measure, and she fulfills it, ends it like on the 5. And lets that ring out, and then repeats it again, and it's a use of melody unlike I've ever heard. I mean, I am on the verge of saying that melody is one of the things. It almost seems obvious, like any 3-year-old in a camp could tell you that melody is important to a song. But sometimes I think that people forget about it, and they overlook just how important it can be.
Yeah. I mean, based on what John was saying also before about how the different instruments were competing and then also working in unison, it really carved out this perfect, almost perfect, because nothing's really perfect, but almost perfect pacing for this song. And then your melody is what really solidified it. For a song that was only 3 minutes and 7 seconds, it went through more and completed more than some of the 6 and 7 minute songs we've listened to. It just goes through these stages that resolve themselves so well,
section by section. It's
honestly,
this is really an ABC.
Yeah, absolutely.
Somewhat. Yeah, I'll let you say your point.
I tried to start 5 times. Honestly, I've heard albums less cohesive.
Than this
And
track.
less experimental and less...
You have. We have.
Yes.
Look at our archive.
And I
True.
love the
Look at our numbers.
I love the final lines on this one because no one ever really understands anybody else's life.
It's simple, but it's so true and so
it
much
was
to
just,
the point.
The way it's phrased
Yeah.
is just so beautiful with the work.
That is an amazing line. I do have
Yeah.
to say. But yeah, I don't want to beat this too much into the ground. It's you could either call this, an ABC, or you probably could attribute a verse chorus structure to this.
I think it was
But
more ABC. It felt more ABC to me.
But it did go back and repeat the A and just the A.
So maybe
particularly.
ABCA or something?
Oh, what
Okay.
Abacaba?
Abacabadabba.
That's the thing. It's called a rondo.
Oh, is it really? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Well, let's move on to the next track, East Side Glory.
Okay.
So, East Side Glory, well, for the first time in the whole album, bam, organ. We have an organ in this track.
It has this track...
And it was out of nowhere. Like, they didn't even really build to the organ. It was just kind of there.
This rang of 1970s prog or classic rock, as we think of it. They used to use the organ a lot, and also Decemberists from recently.
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna throw another band out there who used the organ in this fashion, and that was Pinback. So
There's only
things
one
that came to mind.
There's only one way I can describe this song, and that is living. This song was, with all of its experimentation and changes, was one clear ringing chord. It was a beautiful, probably the most solid thing I've heard this year. I mean, it was amazing how connected from beginning to end this was.
This vies for my favorite.
It had the best moments
With a couple of others.
The best individual moments of the album were on this song, and it is my favorite piece.
I mean, almost inclined to agree with you. This is actually the first moment where I thought that the album was taking on soul, even before the last couple tracks grew on me. Again, use of melody. I gotta restate it. It's beautiful in its brevity, because all things considered, it's a fairly short melody, a fairly short moment, at least. But it hits so hard. Again, more playing around with rhythm, and this is where you really know you're working with someone who's got their chops. Is when you're using rhythm to fit your melody, not vice versa. Not melody. You wrote a 4/4 song, you gotta stay in 4/4. This is why so many melodies can come across as cookie cutter, and that you can forget about them so easily. This is why I'm stressing melody so hard. So, based on what the melody does, and based on what the organ is doing here, she takes a general 6/8 verse, and it almost is like a cycle. You'd think it would be just in 6/8 completely, but instead she throws in a 7/8 there, just one 7/8, to add that one extra beat to let the organ ring out, and that puts it in perspective, and then she pulls it right back to 6/8. So it's 6/8, 7/8, 6/8, 6/8, and that's the cycle. It goes over and over again. It's just a beautiful choice. I mean, knowing when to do that, it makes that 4-measure cycle seem so cohesive.
And what I also really like about this...
Meaningful.
What I really like about this track is the fact that it's constantly building to something, building upon itself, and creating from beginning to end, pretty much. And then, instead of deconstructing it in a very cliche way, like a lot of tracks do, she just goes with a very simple fade-out. And it works so well, because if you were to take apart, at the end, any of the pieces, it just wouldn't have been as beautiful. So instead of jeopardizing the cohesiveness of that piece, she just lets it fade out and does a simple fade.
It's one of the few times. It's one of the few times she actually uses a fade. Usually,
there's two in the album.
These tracks kind of end on a dime.
Yeah,
and the reason being is because this is really an AB song, and ABC probably.
Yeah.
Because that C section is different altogether.
Yeah,
it's different altogether. Not in the fact that it's separate and unmarried to the rest, but in the fact that it takes the sort of the slowness of this. This is a much more slower paced track, going to what I said earlier, and then it takes that light waltzy, because again, 6/8, I told you, everything in 6 is just awesome because you can play around with melodies, and then she pushes that into the next thing, and that's that C section, which is really technical, and it's like it gets more mathematical as it goes.
Yeah.
The guitar, instead of just doing that even, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, instead it's more closer. You hear like those 16th notes, like right before you hit the beat, and everything pops out. Like colors are brighter, textures feel more textury.
This is less. I mean,
it's like a clacking guitar.
When you look at a lot of songs, they tend to be journeys because they do take place over time. I want to say this song is more like an elongated moment for me.
Well, it's like an elongated moment that took off at the end.
Yeah.
Because based on the C section, it's almost as if the song took cocaine.
Yeah, and it's like the fade out is representing it going through the stratosphere and just disappearing into the distance.
Pretty much.
In space.
Oh, look, you call back. Look, you call back. You happy with
He
the
loves his
callback there?
callbacks.
I do. So, moving on to track 9.
Oh, and the bass thump was awesome. The bass thump in D. The bass thumping at the end. Yeah,
Yes.
Cool.
Almost. It was.
I am
almost,
full of side points. I'm sorry.
You're not that sorry.
No.
Moving on to Proof of Life, which is track 9. So,
Okay. Dark by comparison to
the rest of the record.
album,
Yeah.
which is honestly, at this point, I needed to just feel something different, and I love the tone.
Kind of rumbly.
This sets
it
up.
had a thunderous piano, which John gave me the language for, because I couldn't kind of put it into words, but just, it starts with this thunderous piano, and right away you get this gorgeous movement that is quite different from what you had been listening to up to this point.
This, in fact, struck me as more universal. Going with what I said before, how choruses tend to come across as like you're reaching out. The chords themselves struck me as a little bit more rallying here in the verses, actually. And interestingly enough, not the choruses.
And what the thing is about this track also is, even though you said it felt less personal and more like unifying, I find that it's sometimes easier to get an emotional connection to a song that's rallying. An example would be like a song called Move Along by the All American Rejects is one of those very rallying songs for everyone.
And they do something which also happens in this song. They cut out all of their instruments just about and repeat their chorus.
And that's
here,
where you can get pulled in.
It drops out everything except for the simple punctuating piano work and a little bit of bass, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And she says the lines, "All my life it's based on fantasy, and all the gods they've stopped talking to me," and she just rings it out, and it's so touching.
Other point I want to make is vocals. I mean, considering the very light, kind of cute voice that she's had going throughout this entire album, she really takes it down.
Deeper.
This is like a lot more serious. First of all, the song is called "Proof of Life." There's a lot more. There does seem to be more of a reaching out vibe to this. So, as if like she's been in her own little world. She's been introverted for the whole entire album, and I hear all of a sudden she's telling it like it is. Yeah, speaking her heart.
I think that's it for this track. I mean, it was kind of very face value, and that's not a bad thing. It was just, there wasn't a lot to deconstruct on this. It was kind of a very candid track.
I will say one other thing though. There's an insane drum breakdown in the beginning of this track.
Yeah.
After she's done with her moment there, then the track again. It's like these tracks take speed or cocaine, whatever your drug of choice is. In this particular case, I think this was the highlight of the drum in this entire album, which in its entirety has been stellar, and this was just a moment where. It was more than stellar.
That moment is what made this my favorite track on the record, because I loved the piano, but when that drum solo-ish section happened, it really grabbed me, and it was the best drums on the record.
I appreciate seeing another instrument do that. You know how we always say guitars are basically masturbating on stage.
Yeah, this was the drum getting its chance.
The drum pretty much fulfilled that role in this album. It's a great tension builder.
So moving on to the final track, Hell Yes. I mean, from the moment this song starts, you get this kind of prog rock almost sound. This feel that it's
It's the best. It's the best guitar work on the album.
Yeah,
it definitely
you
is
get
the best guitar work.
this construction of rhythms that really kind of take you through something.
I would see people like I talk about them all the time. People like Santana having difficulty keeping up with this chick. It's amazing just what she starts with,
and it sounds like shades of Santana, and even like more towards prog rock. You know, like I could see this song standing up to Godsticks.
No, there's a lot of technicality in here. I think Godsticks is the only other contender in everything that we listen to. Between them
in
and this, in terms of straight up technicality,
yeah, absolutely,
and imagination for all that you can do with all of the above. The other thing here, just to show you how shallow and flighty tastes can be sometimes, is that this almost had what I would have called a problem back in track 4 in terms of kind of not really knowing where your key is. It almost seems to start out in D major, then it goes to B minor, and then it settles that B minor really is your home key and not so much D major. So it's that back and forth. This is good composition here. Back in track 4, I was not quite sure. I thought so because I thought that the idea was a little bit flighty in of itself.
Right.
And yet here, it seems like it all flowed majestically. I can't explain why that is. It's really tough to get down to that nitty-gritty, but it worked.
Absolutely.
It worked here. It all felt like one big rise. Didn't feel like it was trying to decide what it was. It felt like a rise. It gave way to that same, almost like you're running. When it hits that G major chord, it's almost like you're running back and forth. But kind of similar to something we didn't mention in the previous track, in Proof of Life. Those rallying chords gave way to that same running thing, too. That's when the piano was, going low, high, right?
Yeah.
Almost the first time we get a clear piano there. It's a little bit sparser. We get something very, very similar here in Hell Yes. And that gives way to a great breakdown. And I mean a great breakdown.
Yeah.
Which was the perfect way to close in this album. It's kind of a big rock out.
And that breakdown gives way to a fade out. And that's the second fade out on the record. And honestly, between the way that the album started with this kind of jarring, in-your-face, almost unbelievable beginning, and then this great culminating prog rock outro that just fades out, kind of really wraps the album together very nicely. It's a great bookend. It really is.
It's funny. I only have one more comment for something, a specific thing, before we wrap this up, and that's that moment that I had to mention back in track 2, the outro that we were disagreeing on a little bit. It's funny, because as much as I liked that, I almost feel like a new album could be created off of that sound, like more in post-rock territory. And yet at the same time, it was pointed for the early half of this album, but maybe it didn't fit so well within the grand scheme of things. Because it didn't fit the tone so much. I did like it, though, in the way that, it does break it up a bit.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what I liked about it so much. But I didn't know that, when I'm only in on the second track, because after all, I do listen consecutively.
Right.
So, I don't know. Just something to think about.
Okay.
Food for thought. Food for thought.
Food for thought.
Food for thought.
Food for thought.
Who's going first?
Not me. I reserve my right as the chooser to go last.
Steve's going first.
I'm going first, huh?
Well, considering
but I was just talking.
You had the. Well, you can keep talking.
You had a lot to say about this record.
Yeah, I just.
If anything, you guys rushed.
No, as an aside to the listeners.
Not so much rushing as having less to say.
I actually contacted Steve a day early and was like, "This is intimidating. I'm going to be way out of my league. You got to go all science on this because I can't do it."
And in all honesty, I kind of rushed the science. There's a lot more I could have said about each individual thing here, but the same goes for Godsticks too. Even back then, I could have gone into like everything, but that's gonna. I hope there's somewhat of a range of listeners out there as to those who will understand and those who won't. So for those who understand, may hear the reasons why when I mention a certain music theory thing,
and those
it
who
works
don't?
toward the song, and those who don't may understand the simpler side of it and work your way up. That's the hope.
With any luck, they'll actually be educated by this to understand what's going on.
I mean,
and the reality of it is, if you want to know more of the highly technical stuff that we don't get into details about,
do ask me a question.
We're all reachable. Comment on the website or send Steve an email.
Or better yet, ask Marnie question.
Yeah, send her an email directly.
I'd like to ask her a couple
she's
questions.
on Twitter.
She's on
Twitter.
Twitter.
Facebook.
So yeah,
and
definitely
I think
reach
even
out.
MySpace.
Well,
Also, if you ask Steve a question, give him some time because this is gonna be hard.
Yeah, because I've also made a couple mistakes here. I mean, I rushed this based on John's request. I was going to talk a little bit more abstract and art about this, and not so much into technicality. But there's a lot of technicality here.
Yeah.
A lot to talk about. So you're
You're going
decided
first.
that
Go.
I'm going first.
Just
Yeah.
start.
Okay. Well, Marnie Stern. I very much enjoyed this record. I haven't enjoyed anything in this technical degree since Godsticks, which was episode 51. See, I know episodes.
yes, we know. You have them memorized. As I've said before, and I'll say again, it'll be more impressive when we're at 300 episodes.
It's true. I'll do it. You watch.
Okay.
Let's get a little specifics here, though. Of course, style-wise, I enjoy the fact that it's bringing that mid-2000s indie sound to a more complex degree. Because it was always fun, lighthearted music. And I'll admit it, I was really into it back then. I think that it's almost had its day in terms of the genre itself. And I mean like the Franz Ferdinand-esque stuff. By the way, I listened to the new album, it's not that good. It's alright. I mean, it might grow on me, we'll see. But, all these asides. But that aside... I think that this brings it back in a big way. In a really big way. Based on all that it does. There's some moments there, though, where it almost seems to harken back to it and not do enough with it. Where most of these tracks do. There are some moments where it's just like, well, maybe they just wanted to take a break. Those moments on this album, of course, are Noonan, as well as Immortals. These are a couple of holes. And when I say holes, they're only like passively holes. Just because they are very passive tracks. They don't have as strong of a hook. It's a curious choice. I must only conclude that they must have been somewhat throwaways, because when you consider that every other track on this album has a hook, and then another hook, and then some, I mean, it's just, I don't see any reason why else there would be these two tracks here. Just to break it up and kind of let you sit back and just enjoy yourself, because the tone is pleasing. But then there's the other side of the spectrum, and that's the moments that occur in track 2, You Don't Turn Down. I mean, that outro, I could have a field day with how it worked and its placement, theory-wise, coming after the previous two sections. Same goes for Still Moving. I mean, just the way that it... her use of melody, phenomenal. Same goes for East Side Glory, and to be honest, the whole end of this album. We're really only talking about two curious holes here. And you know what? Let's just mention a little bit about track 1. Track 1, I hear, in terms of the cute style of singing, there is a consistency there, from that to the other tracks. Because she does perpetuate that, just not to the same degree. And I respect the shock and awe factor, because, after all, why would you want to make concessions to anybody? And from there on, it is an uphill swing, and that's my favorite kind of album that goes uphill. So let's see. Considering all that, considering the vocals, considering the technicality, considering the section work, making a few exceptions for some of the tracks where I feel like the ideas were a little bit rushed behind to be quickly replaced by a new one. Still, it's something worth enjoying. I'm going to throw this definitely in the 4 range. That goes without saying.
Well, that's kind of obvious. Thank you for that. Stop stalling.
We all know you're doing that.
4.5. This is a 4.5 for all the reasons I just said. That it's those moments that I question, that eyebrow-raising moments where I feel like I need to repeat certain sections just to get my full enjoyment out of it, or fast-forward to the section that I like, It's those moments that are just a little bit too curious for me to really hike it to the far, far upper 4s. But as we said, those are really only reserved for, the full idea. And that's the other thing here. Arc-wise, it's tough with this album. It's full of sporadic ideas, all of them great. And in fact, I'm mostly throwing Arc down the toilet, because we normally waste so much we put so much emphasis on arc, it's almost silly. That when you're faced with this kind of technicality, this kind of skill all around, and just entertainment, I'm not going to even look at it. It's purposeless.
Well, I feel like, for me, when you take an album like this, you have to throw Arc down the toilet. Because if you weigh Arc as heavily on an album like this, it's about talent. If talent precedes or supersedes so many other things, sometimes you can throw that other stuff away because it doesn't matter as much because of the enjoyment level.
It's because you could shuffle around these tracks in, I think, almost any order. I'd still give it the exact same rating.
Yeah.
It's irrelevant.
I mean, I like that it has this kind of split and it does build up because I agree. When you have an album that doesn't disappoint at the end and just gets better and better, I mean, it's hard to not like an album like that just progressively gets better.
Yeah.
And this album does that. I mean, I will admit, the first time I heard it in my car today, I was just kind of completely thrown for a loop by the first track. But then the second track immediately engaged me right afterwards and then pulled me through the rest of the album. And upon a second listen, I really understood the construction of this record. From an emotional standpoint, there's no clear emotion in this album that really stands out. There are moments of it. And then there's a song like Proof of Life where you really get this kind of this powerful feeling. And track 2, you also get this kind of passion or intensity. But it's not clearly positive or negative. And truth be told, I like that. Of course, I like a sad song that makes me cry. I like a happy song that makes me feel good. But it's also kind of nice to have this kind of unclear emotion.
Yeah, the word you're looking for is ambiguity.
Yes.
There you are.
This ambiguity, but not in a negative way. It's just, you don't know what to feel, but you're okay with it. And it pulls you through these moments. I agree with Steve. The 2 tracks he mentioned, it's just, they do feel like these kind of holes in the record. But again, I don't. The rest of the record is so good that you can't really fault those holes because again, they're not bad tracks. They're just not as good as everything else.
Although I will say that I'll withdraw what I said about shuffling around the tracks in any single order because I did just said like an album that progresses and gets you more intrigued as you go on this.
You could listen to this album on shuffle and it wouldn't hurt it.
Yeah.
But I still think it's better in its order.
I can't get rid of that idea because of course that would ruin the shock and awe intro and all the other stuff that I said. There is an arc here in terms of entertainment.
Yes.
Crowd pleasing, perhaps.
That could be it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of a stretch.
That's
but
all you need.
Yeah. It's true. That is all you need. So, I mean, for me, I agree with Steve on almost every point. There are minor moments that we because why would we always 100% agree? Then the podcast would explode. But but all in all, I agree. It's a 4.5. It's an album that really gets you, pulls you in, really entertains you. I mean, on the face value of emotion, being entertained is important sometimes in life, more important than other things. And this is an entertaining record at its core. It's very hard to listen to this and not enjoy it. It's possible, but it's unlikely. So I give it a 4.5.
I'm going to add that there's also a little bit of selfishness to this record, just in terms of the ideas that she loves and wants to move on to all these other ideas. It's just, it's, that's probably the only reason I think I'm not putting it in the upper 4s. It's just, it loves itself.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to lie, I love it too. It's just, it's a little bit pacing.
All right, let's go down the checklist. Beautiful vocals.
Check.
Amazing drum work. Some of the best drum work I've ever heard.
Check.
Incredibly unique guitar work.
Check.
You can stop saying check now.
Okay.
There are issues, and there are issues that you two didn't even talk about.
X.
This has also... It has that same sort of Boards of Canada feel. It's intimidating. There are aspects that are just very difficult to hear. And you said it yourself. You had to go back and re-listen and try to understand it. There's a lot here. It's a technical masterpiece. But because of all that technical ability, it's hard at times.
I want to just quickly interject to say I didn't go back because I didn't understand it. There's some here stuff that's very accessible, even in its complexity. I went back because I enjoyed it. So.
Okay.
Because it's addictive.
I feel that it does have an intimidating
Addicting
feature.
to my taste, at least.
Now, where Boards of Canada wasn't personal, this was. This was very much a soulful album. This is very much laid out in front of you. And I have to say, while intimidating, I think I'm more intimidated by Marnie Stern than by the music, to some extent. If this is who she is, that's a little... It's scary in its complexity. It's almost frightening that someone could be this deep.
The
Yeah, it's
word
like,
you're
I
looking
had
for
to-
is intense.
In fact,
Thank you.
I think we've
Intense.
gone this whole album, and I'm really glad we did. So I'll just overlook the fact that I'm going to say it now. We've gone the whole album without saying the word femrock, because there's so many implications that go with that. Like, oh yeah, indie rock with a female singer. You know, like it seems so basic.
No, this
you
was...
can't
this
put
was-
this in a box at all. It's its own thing. It's her own design.
It was because of how personal it was. I mean, I can overlook that intimidating factor, and I agree with both of you. But I'm not gonna be so low. I'm gonna give it a 4.7, a 4.75. Right, it's right in between just true 5-star masterpiece and 4.5-star awesomeness. It's a 4.75. There's just so much here, so much depth. And just usage of instruments, bass in one, piano in another, organ in a third. I mean, she brings in so many elements and just brings it together with her bass idea. It's beautiful,
I respect that.
Yeah,
and it's
I
got
agree.
East Side Glory, which will not be the most emotional, won't be the most technical, it won't be the most vocal song of my year, but it's probably the best moment I've had this year.
You know, when it comes to 4.5 and up, you're really, like, 4.5 and up is basically...
Memorable.
Not just memorable. No, I mean important to music as an art form.
Yeah, of course.
Like,
well,
should hold a place there.
well, let's look at some...
Within that, as you go from, like, the really high 4.5s or the low 4.5s, it's a matter of taste and well, considering I think that's because each of us have our own idea of where we want music to go.
Yeah.
You know,
it returns
It's
to that
gonna vary.
personalization
I've
of
said
music.
it before. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Anything that's in the upper 4 range should be copied and expanded upon. This is where music should go. Just in my personal conceited opinion, I believe this is the sort of things that should be made.
So
I
to-
go 4, 5,
well,
or
then
higher.
there you are, because that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I agree pretty much the same exact thing. That's why I put it at 5.5. Pretty much the only reason.
4.5.
5.5.
Did I say 5.5?
You said 5.5.
I put it at 4.5.
She broke into the
There
scale.
you go.
She broke the scale.
The only reason I hold back 4.5 is like I said, that pacing
Yeah.
is the one thing I think that should be
So,
controlled.
for an overall review, buy it. This is an album worth buying.
Yeah, okay.
It's not an ignore, it's not a just listen, buy this record. There are very few people, I think, who would not enjoy this. It just seems like something that would have something for everybody.
Yeah.
And as a side note, she did have one album. It was her second album, I believe, that was called I Am It, He Is It, You Are It, She Is It, and it's just a series.
And it is it, and that is that.
Yeah, that is, and it is like 15 sentences in a row. I love it. And it does a great job of summing up her style of music.
But with the wrap up and
So
the
she's all
overall
spaz
rating,
herself. So that's me saying the
Yeah.
pacing and everything. That's not gonna. And frankly, I don't want it to change. I really don't. It's
I think this album is great the way it is, and I agree that. I mean, let's just take a brief review of the year so far, since we're getting towards the end of the year, being that we're in September now. Let's look at some of the 5.5.
The
or
4.5.
4.5
The
albums.
highs.
I mean, let's look at Darlings of Lumberland, a song that, back when we were only listening to an album once, we were all speechless for the first at least 30 seconds to a minute of that track and had nothing to say. We were just mouths
to
agape.
be honest, that track in itself was spastic, really
Yeah.
spastic. And this is why I like it, because I enjoy spasticity. In fact, even the tracks that I just to differentiate the tracks on this album itself, when making the difference between like track 4 versus track track 7 and track 10, right? 7 and 10, spastic in their own right. for some reason, more artfully formed than track 4.
Yeah.
Such a subtle thing
Difference,
right
yeah.
there, right?
Absolutely.
Which means that you're playing with fire when you get to those upper echelon, 4.5 and higher. Darlings of Lumberland, just for the fact that I don't think we expected it at all.
No, not at all. And also...
yeah, I have re-listened to it. It stands up.
No, of course it does.
Recently.
No, I listen to it constantly. But also, I mean, take a band like Steam Powered Giraffe.
Yeah,
and a song like
take
Honeybee, where Honeybee is not complex per se, except in the harmonies, but it's just so beautiful.
It's Honeybee, autoatomic, electronic harmonics, which are just at a primal level voices that grip you because of 3 individuals coming together and creating something greater than the sum of its parts.
I think that modern camp composition is making that spastic idea throwing seem perfectly natural.
Yeah.
As if
never
noticed it.
Look at Macklemore and Ryan Lewis. This artist, Ryan Lewis, who's mixing these songs and playing instruments that you would have never heard in hip-hop 10 years ago. Not like this. And and then taking lyrics that paved the way for an idea and a movement. A song like Same Love. That
you would have never heard an instrumental on a on a hip-hop album
Let alone
20 years ago.
4 or 5 minute one.
Yeah.
And yes, so far that's still my favorite album of the year. I'm just putting that out there.
It's just, I think it's important to really, and since
and you know what, that album and that was just full of irony.
Yeah.
Which is another weird thing, and it's a little bit of a spastic idea the way it was presented. When you look at Gold, when you look at White Walls, I mean, it's just full of irony. Wings.
Well, as if we haven't beaten this idea to death, but I'm always looking for in music like an ironically stated musical phrase, if that makes any sense, to compare with John's straight up literary touch. Because there's a lot you can achieve with lyrics. I do believe that you can achieve the same exact amount with music. It's
Absolutely.
just a lot more harder to achieve.
Godsticks did that, and to the almost the same extent Boards of Canada did it.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm amazed how much you love Boards of Canada.
Oh, you have no idea. I use it.
I brought
I'll be
Boards of
honest.
Canada on as an ambient track just to see how it would take an ambient. I knew Boards of Canada had reputation, and I liked their earlier stuff. This newer album, this was actually slower to grow on me. Actually, Boards of Canada. Tomorrow's Harvest is the album I'm referring to.
Yeah.
Episode 54.
To be honest, I actually use it as a palate cleanser a lot of times because, while ambient, it is so engaging.
There you are. It's so funny, considering I could see, it's just like I was talking about with Marnie Stern, like the wrong person, makes this one track, and they might think one thing. Well, if the wrong person listened to Boards of Canada, I could easily see them being bored out of their skulls.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, like, I'm not as obsessed with that record as you two might be. I like it.
I don't think I'm obsessed as John is.
But I'm
in love with it.
I
I'll be
don't
honest.
think I could listen to it
in
its entirety, but I like it. And I think I'll go back to it, but I wouldn't listen to it over and over again. Whereas, like, an album like...
I love its tone, because I'm all about aesthetic. That's a whole other thing that is separate from kind of the stuff that we're doing here, or in Godsticks. That's an individual aesthetic. But Boards of Canada, Tomorrow's Harvest, achieved something that existed. It was a full-blown exploration into the world of 70s, 80s, electronica, synth art form, and science as it was then.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I do not listen to the whole album, but I will choose the opening lines to one of those stories that we discovered in there, the 4 or 5 tales that they tell throughout that album, and listen to one of the stories, or maybe 2 in a row. And that is just such a calming thing, even though they tend to be about the end of the world and all that jazz.
Well, what I like about these records, you can...
The end of the world was kind of looming in the 70s and 80s.
It was. You can kind of also tell, like, I mean, I like when one of us brings in a 4.5 or higher track, or even a 4 or higher, because those albums always get reactions we are totally not expecting. Some of the lower ones, too, but, like... Take, for example, Godsticks. Steve would go prattling on about prog forever and ever, and I didn't listen to that much prog. I'm not a huge Pink Floyd fan. So when he brought Godsticks, of course I'm not expecting to like it at all. Meanwhile, I had forgotten that prog doesn't necessarily mean a specific sound per se, so I found roots in grunge and heavy metal in Godsticks, which pulled me in immediately.
That goes back to our prejudice conversation.
Yeah.
Episode 43. I got it. But, you know, how we all have blinders on sometimes when we hear certain genres. We hear certain ideas thrown at us, and sometimes it's just something that we've built over perceptions, people that we knew who were into. Who knows the number of things that that add up to where these prejudices fall, and that's just one of them. We have to remember that it is very individualistic, even when you're trying to fit a thing. Fit a niche, it's still incredibly individualistic.
Yeah,
it always has the potential. Never write off anything.
And we've all been surprised or changed based on... I mean, I don't think any of us expected Steve to like moments of Nine Inch Nails better than me and John, since we were fans of it.
Believe it or not, you just reminded me. I am post-mortem changing my rating. I'm not exactly sure what to yet, but it'll be reflected in the year-end
review. We'll talk. Yeah, just like I had said,
Queens of the Stone Age.
Queens of the Stone Age, I like so much more. Now that I've listened to it a bunch more times, I really fell in love with that record. Especially after Alon, who commented on Facebook, and we haven't addressed it yet on the website, commented about how the album reflected his near-death experience, where he was actually dead for 10 minutes or something like that.
So there's a perfect example of
Alon would be from the Wall Street Players.
Future Money, as you audience members may know him. But yeah, I think it was important today to talk a little bit about this impact of the 4 or higher, because it really
4 or higher or 4.5 or higher. We talk about the greats or the
I guess the 4.5 or higher.
The 0 to 2.5 is sort of very forgettable and not quite worth your time. The 2.5 to 3 is music.
In fact, I think this is what I really want to talk about today. I want to do a verbal review of... We have 3 articles up from earlier in our podcast, where we all described what our own perception of these ratings really is.
Yeah.
Be it 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, which is where we end, because you got to stop somewhere. And we all have articles. You can look them up earlier on. Each of us described what we feel it is, but I think we should talk about this a little bit verbally and try and hash it out. So, John, pick up where you left off.
Well, I think we'll skip over the lower numbers, because 0 shouldn't be made, period. Shouldn't be performed, period. It is that bad. It is a detriment to our society.
In fact, that was a discussion of ours that, is there a 0 rating? That's from a very early episode. And originally I thought there wasn't. You actually were able to convince me that it was hate music.
Yeah, for the most
music
part,
that is where the message is actually an opinion that
is
for your reasons is not a great opinion to have. Not that any opinion is really wrong, but there can
some
be
are.
Some are.
None are wrong, but some are.
Yeah.
Ones would be what?
Nazi rock.
No, ones aren't Nazi rock.
No, I mean Zero's. Zero's a Nazi rock.
Ones would be just basic, very simple, really not worth your time, but childish. Like, we could consider
not
a lot
even,
of...
because there's children's music that's complex and fun.
Yeah, but we're going to say Dora the Explorer
childish,
isn't.
as in trying to live up to the reputation of something where you just are in somewhat of a bubble.
Well, let's take, for
a
example,
bubble, which is like, I don't want to dissuade any musician from achieving their goal, but for certain there are reasons
chops.
When we say garage band, like, if you're working in a garage band, that's great. The question is, when do you get out of the garage band? When are you selling records, and when are you making selling platinum records off of the same exact stuff that probably should still be in the garage band? I know it might sound a little bit pretentious, but let's face it, at some point you gotta wake up. It's when we're talking, at some point when you're 29, 30 years old, you need to realize what you want to do with your life. It's like, life is short. We do have brackets, even as much as we want to pretend they don't exist.
I mean, I think we can all agree that from 1 to 3, our ratings are very similar. Not the same, but similar.
Yes, they're just music.
It's the 3, 4, and 5 marks where what we're looking for kind of changes. Though then again, I think as we get towards the 5, they start to become similar again, depending.
No, yeah.
It depends on the
it's
album.
like what I said before. Yeah, the 4.5 to 5 is really going to depend on taste. Taste or subtle little things.
Yeah.
So 2 to 3 range would just be something that you can actually go down the checklist and say, yes, it has everything involving music. To some extent, it has a beat, it has a tempo,
1,
it has
even as early as
instruments.
1.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you hit 3, then you've just made the checklist.
I mean, 3 essentially is the average. 3 is like one of our best average albums, or that I think me and Steve rated average, John might have rated lower, was One Republic's new record. You know, it was okay. It hit some notes. It was a standard pop record. It had highs, it had lows.
Not falling behind, really.
But it wasn't making any strides.
You know you're
either.
gonna have
No
you know you're gonna have an audience.
Yes, no mistakes.
No
That's the big
strides.
thing.
Yeah.
There you are. Yeah, mistakes
okay.
is kind of a funny one, but well.
Now, in the 3 to 4, that's where things are... That's where we start saying this is very much music as what would be considered normal, and then it starts adding up. No, I mean,
funny phrases.
It's just okay music, but then it starts adding up. Well, you have very good lyrics here. You have a great theme here.
Yeah, usually these tend to excel in at least one aspect.
Yeah.
Like,
something that touches you.
So definitely something that either touches you or yeah, makes your neck hair stand up, that kind of thing. Something that it's clear that if that were to develop or be phrased correctly with rest in context, then it may very well be a phenomenal album. You know, usually it's wonderful singing, but maybe the drum work kind of lags behind. Maybe there's not such a great idea. Maybe the lyrics are kind of static. Those kind of things
Or an incredible guitarist. Or an incredible guitar-bass combination, but they really have nothing to work with in context.
Yeah, this is the 3 to 4.
And once you hit 4, that's when you're starting to see guys that are going to be merging genres in the interesting, beautiful ways. That are creating pieces that are very much more along the unique side. 4, you don't have checklists anymore. 4, you're starting to get true, unique pieces.
Yeah, there's definitely something wholeheartedly original to this record by Marnie Stern. 4.5 is solidly entrenched in the 4s. It's completely original, and it showcases its talent in almost every area.
4s are also bands that maybe they're not breaking trends or breaking boundaries, but they know what they can do and do what they do well. A band like All American Rejects, who have a specific sound, but then have a song like Affection, which we've talked to death, which just breaks down the walls on that album.
Affection with Beekeeper's Daughter is just an amazing transition from high
pop rock,
high fidelity to soul.
Yeah. And it's polarizing, and albums that have that polarizing moment, but still throughout the album...
Honeybee.
Honeybee, absolutely.
That's a song in and of itself
That's off of Steam Powered Giraffe.
Or even bands where they're within their realm and do well with it, like Eve 6, where I read them really highly because I'm a 90s kid. This is not any surprise to anyone. And they did what they do so well on that record.
Abandoned Pools.
Yes.
Did it as well.
Yes.
It's just you did something special. You are leaps and bounds above the crowd. You are an individual.
I remember where we put Abandoned Pools at.
They were in the 4 to 4.
They were in the 4s.
Were they?
Yeah.
Well,
he was in 4s.
Let's be really,
4,
really
5.
specific from 4.5 up.
Yes.
In fact, I want to go down the line, and this time I'm not starting first.
Okay, 4.5. I would
for
consider
you. And I think this is what we really have to say for you.
Is first, it is something that I want to play on repeat.
Yep.
It's going to be something that is either truly creating new genre styles or taking a genre into a unique spin. That's a big thing. If you're going to do rock and roll, I want something that is rock and roll at its core, but is not on its peripherals, is not there. I want something that pushes boundaries. That's a 4-5. It's got to be boundary pushing, not just something that's you are exemplifying a beautiful sound, but is actually changing music, how it's regarded. That's what you're looking at a 4-5.
Yeah, making absolutely no concessions, like I'm going to fit a zone and be happy there.
And
I mean, as great as that can be, and as many great things as you can do with that, I would have to put that at least below 4.5, just because there's
no satisfaction in the artist's work, and that's the thing.
And I feel less individuality there. Like I have it's a scent, for that kind of thing when you feel like you're trying to fit a niche, even as well as you do with it. 4.5 up is I would take it further, not just boundary changing, but paradigm shift.
Paradigm shift I reserve for the 5. Like, truly creating, not going from classic rock and creating psychedelic, but creating rock and roll style music. Like, creating a super genre, or redefining a super genre. Not just redefining punk, but actually going back and saying, this is what everything else will be like from now on. This is why the only album that actually has gotten a 5 is Macklemore.
That's funny, though, because not every band really says that. I mean, many of them are actually very humble about it. I mean, like, this is me. That's what I like doing. Yet it has that effect. Even if it's just on you, even if it's just on one person, but this is all based on taste.
And that's why I consider The Heist by Macklemore and Ryan Lewis to be what hip hop should be now.
See, the 4.5 to 5 is a little different for me. 4.5 is about the same to what John's speaking. The place I changed a little bit is on the paradigm shift thing, because to me, paradigm shift being a 5 is kind of duh. Like, of course a paradigm shift is going to be a 5. That's obvious. But I don't think a 5 only has to be a paradigm shift. I don't think it has to be a paradigm shift to be a 5. For me, to get to 5, and I've given a few more 5s than anyone else on the podcast, is because for me, you have to take me on a journey that artist hasn't previously done, and or it's just, you have to take me somewhere. And so bands like Matchbox 20, I think I gave Eve 6 a 5 as well. Definitely, obviously, Macklemore and Ryan Lewis. You have to take...
And
Godsticks. You have to take me through an emotional ride. It doesn't have to necessarily be highs and lows, but you have to take me somewhere. I want to feel like I'm going somewhere with this record. I'm not just listening to music anymore. And if you take me on that journey, you'll get a 5 from me. Because a band like Macklemore and Ryan Lewis, I still can't listen to that record without crying during Same Love. It doesn't matter how many times I hear that song.
Same Love and Neon Cathedral actually both still
are
get me.
Tear jerkers every time.
And Starting Over.
And that's how you know you have a 5 album. Same with Matchbox 20. There's songs on their newest record that just took me to places that a lot of albums haven't done. The reason that, a band like Steam Powered Giraffe, who I really like, but weren't a 5, was because songs took me on a journey, but the album didn't feel like a cohesive journey. There were fallouts.
It was a vaudeville. There's that.
But I mean, they've cultivated a live show that's unlike anything else that's out now.
Yeah, okay. If you like Steam Powered, you gotta see their YouTube videos. Oh, jeez.
But I think that's really the defining difference between me and the two of you with 5s is I don't need the paradigm shift to be a 5. And what really polarized my review style that made me feel more confident and realized I was still doing true to myself was when we reviewed Below October. And I was so much higher than you guys because on an emotional level, that album went places emotionally that didn't go anywhere else.
I'm going to use that as the transition for what I'm going to say here, because 4.5 to 5 for me, really, it does... It's funny because I'm talking about for me, even though for the rest, but it does depend on what you're feeling at that particular time, what you are feeling at that particular time, which is why they can vary so much from person to person, and even from band to band within the same person. For instance, when it comes to a band like, since you're talking Macklemore, I felt like at that particular time, in listening to it, regardless of the music, and regardless of the fact that there was still very good music, there were a lot of factors working in play, in tandem with that album. At the same time, I feel like there was there was the one thing leaping out, which is why it exceeded, perhaps maybe some others on this list, and that was, of course, the meaning for each and every song, the preachiness. It's not every day that I go toward the preachy stuff, but, you have to accept it when you see it, so every once in a while that is more important. Even though usually, for me, it's not. Which is why there is probably only one other band, or a couple of other bands, that may have exceeded that. I think that's As Tall as Lions and Godsticks for me, which have gone to 4.9 and 4.5. And that's because that particular moment, I felt like different things were working at play for me at that moment. And perhaps, for the rest of my musical career. In what I'm looking to see from other bands. As John said, the paradigm shift. Even though the paradigm shift, I do believe, can start as early as 4.5, Marnie Stern has easily got that for me, to be honest. The upper fives, or the 4.9, the 5 itself, it comes down to me for... It comes down to, first of all, emotion. That goes without saying. And aesthetic. The pure originality of the idea, and last but not least, the overall art form. The lack of that selfishness, where you're in the moment, and you just want to put forth you're going to put forth meaning, you're going to put forth preachiness, you're going to put forth that, or you're going to put forth, here's a random good idea, things like that. But you think of the art form front to back. How will this appear from the first note of the first track to the last note of the last? That's really what it comes down to. I think it's that far-reaching idea is really, that's the separator. But it's so rare to come across, because let's face it, life gets in the way of that. You can't always plan your magnum opus every single time. It's simply not possible. But by sheer accident, some great musicians will achieve it. The magnum opus.
I think that's a great place to kind of wrap up, because that kind of is a really great way to sum up kind of where we all come from, and we sometimes do very much meet on the same level like we did today, more or less.
It's like, for that reason, you need to be a meticulous asshole, while at the same time have the voice of God reaching to you at that particular moment, just to, put up ideas that have never been done before and never will be again.
So before we start to close up this episode, Steve, will you bring us some spam mail, please?
Please.
Oh, well, since you said please.
Actually, please don't.
Really?
John,
No.
shush.
No.
Yeah.
It's tradition.
There you go. See? There would have been a contention there, but since you both agree... I do not write many responses, but I did a few searching and wound up in American Breakdown, Electra Heart Chronicles, The Death and Rebirth of the Diva. And I do have a couple of questions for you, if you don't mind. Could it be just me, or does it look like a few of the comments look written by brain-dead visitors? And if you're writing at additional places, I'd like to keep up with anything new you have to post. Would you make a list of all of your comment pages, like the Twitter feed, Facebook page, or LinkedIn profile? Check out my website. Discount codes. Discount codes.
No, that was good. That was actually quite subtle up until the end.
That's why I liked it, because he acknowledged the problem. Our posts are written by brain-dead visitors, aka spam, of which this particular person was not exempt. But he was a self-aware spam bot, and I like that.
Yeah,
and
self-awareness is important.
No,
Self-awareness is good.
That's
That's what needs a 5-star. 5-star, self-awareness. You need to know what you're doing.
He actually asked us for our Twitter and Facebook and all that so that he could spam us there as well, which I find to be quite ingenious as far as bots go.
That's a paradigm shift for bots.
Yes, they're becoming self-aware.
I really don't like this trend of reviewing the spam mails, but, nobody
stars.
listens to me
5
anyway.
stars.
5 stars.
Skynet.
Anyway.
Oh, come on, we need some brevity.
So, first and foremost, as I said at the top of the show, by the time this drops, our iTunes page should be back up. So go check it out, subscribe, write a review, tell us what you think. Good, bad, I don't care, just write something. Also, email us. You got questions, comments, send us an email at crashchordsblog@gmail.com. Also, we have a donate button on the website. We're always trying to make strides to make the show better, improve the quality, all of that stuff, make the website better, give us your money. Then we can make it better.
There's that.
Not even coy.
Not even a little bit. No, but if you guys donate, it'll just go to making the show better, bringing better quality content, bringing more guests, all of that stuff. Because this podcast comes out of our pockets. Finally, the big news we've been promoting for weeks now. The next show, we have Painless Parker on. He's going to play some live songs for us, chat with us, and he's bringing us an album. The album he wants us to review is the newest record by Carolina Chocolate Drops called Leaving Eden. So none of us have listened to Carolina Chocolate Drops, although the name sounds familiar, so I may have and not remember. Either way, this is the album that Painless Parker is bringing to us next week. So
we're gonna hash this out.
And we get to have a guest rating.
We're going to have a talk about mandolins.
Yes,
we will have our... Well, this is actually a planned topic, because we're going to talk about everything guitar-related.
Yes.
As it is one of the most important instruments.
And fonts. We'll talk about fonts. It's a reoccurring topic.
It's not a reoccurring topic. You just bring it up because he had a rant about it on the Wasties podcast.
No, we keep bringing up the fact that he had a rant about it on the Wasties.
He likes fonts.
He does.
He does like fonts. Anyway... On that note, music is life,
and
life is good.
Have a hum-diggity-do, a good time.